at Liquor Vault's anniversary party. Located at 2901 Tazewell Pike, check out their specials and sign up to get discounts at liquorvault.com.
Smoky Mountain Brewery is the place to be for game day. From the moment you walk in, it's wall-to-wall big screens, making Smoky Mountain Brewery the perfect place to watch the Vols or your favorite team in action. With locations in Turkey Creek, Maryville, Pigeon Forge, and Gatlinburg, you're never far away from a great time at Smoky Mountain Brewery. Try one of their world-famous microbrews like Black Bear Ale, Mountain Light, or Cherokee Ale. Juicy burgers, wings that bring the heat, and delicious handmade pizzas made with hand-tossed crust from the freshest ingredients and their own special sauce from a secret recipe, topped off with hand-grated cheese and farm-fresh toppings. And don't forget, those famous microbrews are also available in kegs for your next party or in 6-packs and growlers to go. So grab your crew and head to Smoky Mountain Brewery and tell them Fan Run Radio sent you. Smoky Mountain Brewery. Eat local, eat good.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Go ahead, feel your engine. Admire that perfectly installed exhaust. Your vehicle's moving along this freeway like it was made from fresh installs and a whole lot of love. With eBay Motors, you get over 122 million parts to keep it running. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, they'll be the perfect fit every time. Plus, at these prices, well, we're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
All right. We're live here from the White Claw Hard Seltzer Studios here in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's overtime here on Fan Run Radio, and it is a special day as Tennessee football kicks off their fall camp as they get ready for the season opener. 1 month from today is Furman will travel to Knoxville, Tennessee to travel to Tennessee as Tennessee hosts Furman for the first game of the season. Myself, Garrett Armbrust, Caleb DeBusk here to get you through your Wednesday evening. Caleb feeling a little under the weather tonight, but still here, and we appreciate him toughing it out for us, and we appreciate you and everyone listening to us and making us a part of your Wednesday evening. As a reminder, however you are listening to Overtime, whether it's through Twitter, YouTube, however it may be, you can interact with us through the chat box and leave a like and a comment on the video. We do appreciate your support, but before we get into a busy day of Tennessee football practice, we'll discuss some of the top players that were at fall camp today. As Rocky Top Insider's Ryan Sylvia was there and shared in his article some of the stuff that he saw today. And then we'll get into some more college football news nationally in our second hour. And then we'll talk about a Tennessee player that has a chance to break a record at Tennessee, the all-time record in 2026. We'll let you know if that's possible and how we think that player can do that this season. But before we jump into the rest of the show, let's welcome in Caleb. Caleb, how are you doing today?
Doing good. First day of fall camp. You got a lot of stuff to keep up with, but it's been a fun day.
Awesome. Well, as you said, a busy day as today was the first day of fall camp as Tennessee is getting ready for their first game of the season, as I mentioned moments ago, against Furman, which will take place on September 5th. We're finally getting to that part in the season where we don't have to talk about NCAA lawsuits anymore. We don't have to talk about the transfer portal. We can finally talk about what's going on the field, where these starting positions are going to be, who's beating players out, who's looking good, who's not looking good, and we can actually start talking about the product on the football field, which is a Tennessee football fan and as a college football fan as general is something that I like to discuss. I get kind of tired of talking about all this lawsuit drama and all the other kind of BS that you have to deal with during the college football offseason. But, I mean, Caleb, just how exciting is it to be back? Guys, maybe not hitting each other yet, but you got some pads on, you got guys competing, and you got football 1 month away now.
Yeah, it's definitely a change of pace from what we've dealt with for most of the summer, which is just whether it's a Brendan Sorsby, whether it's Arian Carter, whether it's something else to do with the NCAA. It's nice to talk about actual football.
No doubt about it. Well, let's get into what we saw today. is I think one of the main things that I noticed when I was watching some of the videos of practice today and some of the quotes and some of the stuff that was flying around practice. I mean, the guys just looked bigger from what you saw in the spring. You know, you've seen this summer, program with a Derek Owens who's come over and developed that championship strength and conditioning culture that he had at Indiana last season. And Indiana obviously won the national championship last year with a lot of 2 and 3-star talent and guys out of the transfer portal that maybe didn't have homes at other top programs, were JMU transfers. Stephen Daly, one of their top players last year, was a Kent State transfer. And Derek Owens developed these players, along obviously with Signetti, but developed these players into bodies where when they got into the playoff and they played these top teams and they played the Miami and the Alabamas and the Oregons in the playoffs, they were able to dominate in those games, and especially at the line of scrimmage. And that was a theme of what you saw and heard about today was the O-line looked bigger, the D-line looked bigger, and I saw a lot of wide receivers that looked bigger today. And I think one of those people that showed up immediately on my screen today was TK Keys, obviously the true freshman out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 5-star, a guy that, is not just going to be a factor in the wide receiver room this season. It is a player that you would expect is going to be a factor in this wide receiver room for the next 3 to 4 seasons. The guy that's going to be here at Tennessee and is going to be one of your best offensive weapons over the next few years. TK Keys looks like a grown man out there, for an 18, 19-year-old kid that's just starting his first semester, of college practice. This is a guy that looks like he's been in college football for 2 or 3 years. And we're going to talk about the depth of this wide receiver room. And outside of Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews, this room still goes deep. You still have a Radarius Jackson. You still have a Travis Smith Jr. You even have a Tyreek King, who's a local guy. Plenty of guys in this wide receiver room that are going to be able to make impacts. Caleb, when you saw TK Keys today, what were your initial impressions? And did you kind of see what I saw, that this guy, he looks like a beast? This guy looks like someone that could contribute immediately and could be a factor in SEC play for the Vols this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you've heard going into it, is that he just couldn't wait to get out there. It's kind of seems to be a theme with a lot of these guys coming in, is that they don't look like 18-year-old true freshmen. A lot of people say the exact same thing about Faison, and it's just really exciting to see a guy like TK Keys of his talent level be as committed as he is, because you see a lot of guys who come in 5 stars like that, they just kind of mosey around, they don't really care. But TK Keys seems to he seems to have all the attributes that you want.
See if you can turn your microphone up just a little bit. The chat box saying maybe they're having a little bit of a tough time hearing you. We want to make sure that we can hear all of your opinions as well. But as you said, I mean, the TK Keys, a guy that's going to be able to make an impact, I think, immediately this season. He's going to be in a loaded room. And we talk about that. We've talked about that all offseason. Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley coming back. I think Braylon Staley can be one of the best wide receivers in the SEC this season. I think Mike Matthews is right there with him. I think Staley's slightly above Matthews right now if you were to compare the two. But, I mean, it's a 1A, 1B type of, wide receiver 1 type player. And then you kind of go through, the rest of the receiving room. And you have a Radarius Jackson who played, not as much maybe as he would have liked last season, but still for a freshman last year, he played well in the moments that he got playing time and live game reps. Travis Smith Jr., another guy that people are very excited and very high on. And Tyreek King, a freshman. You might not see him play as much this season, but I think another guy that down the line is going to be a future star for this team. Caleb, when you look at, a Radarius Jackson, Travis Smith Jr., and now a TK Keys, I think the 3 kind of main factors outside of the Braylon Staley and the Mike Matthews, when you look at those 3 guys, who do you think has the biggest impact in this room? Is it Radar? Is it Travis? Or do you think it's going to be a TK Keys as a true freshman?
Honestly, I'm going to go with a TK Keys. Like, just somebody of his body type and his skill level, even though he is a true freshman, I think he can come in and make an impact day one. I think it's very possible that you see him as that 3rd starting wide receiver spot out there. Obviously, don't know until games start, because Heupel's one of those guys where you're not going to know basically anything until it's game week, especially with the quarterback. I don't think we'll know anything about that until Furman week. But yeah, I say TK Keys. I'm really impressed with what I've seen and heard out of just today with practice and everything.
And I mean, when you look at all 3 of those guys that we're talking about, really, 5, 6, 7, I mean, this is a deep wide receiver room. I think there's other wide receiver rooms in the SEC that could maybe say, I mean, I don't really think there's any receiving rooms in the SEC, maybe outside of Texas. I mean, you have a Ryan Wingo and a Cam Coleman in that room. That's hard to say that they're top 2 guys. or I think maybe they might be slightly a step above a Mike Matthews and a Braylon Staley. But you look at Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews, I think those two receivers are as good as really anybody's top two receivers in the SEC. But when you look at the depth of the room, too, I think that's where things are really impressive. Texas, they have three good receivers. They have a Cam Coleman and a Ryan Wingo that I said. They have an Emmett Mosley. But I don't think they're like Tennessee where they have 6, 7, 8 guys in that wide receiver room that over the next few seasons you think can make impacts. And I think that's why I look at Tennessee's wide receiver room and have so much optimism, not just for this year, but 2027 is going to be a big year. And even these guys that are just getting on campus now for even 2028. And I know we want to look at specifically 2026. This is, fall camp is for this season. But Caleb, when you look at the depth of this wide receiver room, how excited are you for the future too? Because I just don't think there's too many teams in the SEC that have the depth in the wide receiver room that Tennessee has. And that speaks a lot to the recruiting that you've done out of these guys, because none of these guys in your wide receiver room have come out of the transfer portal, really. All of these guys are homegrown talent. Now, over the past few years, you've gone in the portal and you've got a Chris Brazzell from Tulane, but even him, it took a year here. I mean, his first year at Tennessee, he was solid, but he made a massive jump last season before being drafted by the Panthers this season. Dante Thornton was a good player at Oregon, but comes over to Tennessee, and I thought his game even kind of shifted to a different level. So how important and impressive is it that you have got all these talented wide receivers that you've kind of grown, homegrown talented?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've said since we started really looking towards this season, is just how deep this wide receiver room is going to be. I think it's one of the best in the SEC, probably just behind in Texas in terms of just top to bottom talent. I mean, we got whether it's TK Keys or Mike Matthews or Braylon Staley. Like, I think personally, I think that's going to be your starting five. But then you get down and then you got we could run 4 in, 4 out on with some of these packages and be just fine. It's the depth of this receiver room is something that we haven't seen in a long time.
I agree. Well, the most important thing you got to have, though, when you have good wide receivers is you have to have a quarterback that can distribute the ball to them. And obviously, entering fall camp, the number one storyline is going to be who is QB1 when Tennessee takes the field against Furman. And, I think whoever comes out of the tunnel in the first half of the Furman game doesn't necessarily mean that they're the QB1. I think you'll have a quarterback name, most likely. Obviously, you're definitely going to have a quarterback name by the Georgia Tech game, you would hope. But I wouldn't be surprised if Faison won the job and maybe McIntyre starts the game against Furman and Josh Heupel kind of stays quiet, doesn't want to tip his hand to a Georgia Tech team that you have respect for Brent Key. You expect to be able to beat Georgia Tech. I've said over the past couple days here on the show, I don't think we're going to walk in to Bobby Dodd and win the game by 20 points. I think Georgia Tech, while they do lose a lot of pieces, Haynes King, they lose their running back, and Isaiah Canyon, Eric Singleton, a wide receiver. They lost a lot of pieces on defense. I still think they have some good pieces on their team. I've seen some video coming out of their fall camp with Alberto Mendoza. I think his deep ball looks pretty good. You look at a running back that they get in Justice Haynes coming from Michigan. I think they're going to be able to run the ball very effectively in that first game of the season. So I think Georgia Tech, even though you have beat these ACC teams, you clobbered Virginia and Nashville in 2023, and 2024 you clobbered NC State and Charlotte, and then last season you clobbered Syracuse and Atlanta. The difference between those three games was those were all neutral site games. This game is going to be an on-campus game at Georgia Tech, and I think a night road game obviously has been one of the bugaboos for Josh Heupel during his time at Tennessee, even when you've played teams that you're better than and you have a better roster than. So especially with the second game of the season, I don't think either team is going to be playing, as good as they hope to by October, November. Both teams are going to make some mistakes in that game, but I still think Tennessee's the best team, going into that game, but I don't think you want to necessarily maybe tip your hand. So maybe McIntyre starts out the first half of the Furman game, even if Faison has won the QB battle. And like I said, Heupel may not say anything, and then you go into week 2, and maybe Faison's actually the starter, and maybe Georgia Tech didn't know necessarily exactly what they were preparing for, who was going to be QB1. When you looked at the QB battle today, Faison, when he was interviewed, noted that he believes him, McIntyre, and even Ryan Staub, the Colorado transfer, all learn things from one another. He said that they can all kind of pick things up from one another. He thinks each person maybe does one thing a little bit better than another, but each player can also learn one thing from another. Caleb, obviously this is a competition, and basically a two-man competition. Obviously, I don't think anyone believes Ryan Staub can win this battle, but when you look at Faison between McIntyre, and I think most of our fan base has probably wrote off that Faison is going to be QB1 for this Georgia Tech game week 2 and at the beginning of the season. But as much as it is a battle, how important of an element is it for these teammates to still work together? Because that was something that you saw, Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. In 2021, Joe Milton won that battle. He goes down with injury, and Hendon Hooker had to come in and finish the season. And then 2022, Hendon Hooker was arguably the best quarterback in the country. So even if you lose the battle, you have to stay ready, and you still have to be able to pick things up from the other guy. So I think it's important for those two to still have a very good relationship with one another, even though they want to beat each other for that starting job.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're still teammates. You're still all working for the same goal, and whether or not you think it's going to be Faison or McIntyre, or as much as it's going to be unlikely, Staub. You like to hear that kind of talk out of an 18-year-old true freshman this is his first season on campus. He sounds very mature, very put together, and it's a positive sign.
Well, Josh Heupel also said that, a lot of this is going to come down to they're fine with players making mistakes. You just don't want to see the quarterback make the same mistake twice. How can you bounce back from if you throw an interception in one of these, when you're in camp and fall practice, if you throw an interception to a TJ Metcalf or a Kyan Lee, someone in the secondary, in the Vols secondary that's going to be really good, it's okay. You're a young quarterback. Just don't make the same mistake twice. Learn from that experience. And I think this is also good for the QB battle when you kind of go into these live reps as you get closer to the games, specifically week 1, this is going to be a pretty good Tennessee defense, and I think specifically a pretty good Tennessee secondary. So I think if you can, obviously you kind of know the looks that the Tennessee defense is going to have being in practice every day and schematically what you're seeing. But, I think if you can go up against the top defenders on the Tennessee secondary, that's really going to help you when you get into SEC play, because I think there's going to be a lot of secondaries in the SEC that aren't going to be as good as Tennessee secondary. So, Caleb, when you look at that from live reps during practice, how impactful do you think that is, that whoever wins this quarterback job does get to see a TJ Metcalf, a Kyan Lee, all these types of guys that are going to be out for Tennessee in the secondary this season? How much do you think those players can help the quarterback battle?
Yeah, that's something that I said I don't know if it was yesterday or Monday, but I said having a guy like Jim Knowles and a defense of the caliber that he can produce, it's nice having that there because it makes your offense just that much better. I think your offense can be much improved when you're playing one of the best passing defenses in the SEC potentially versus one of the worst in the country. I think that just makes your offense that much better.
I agree. Well, we'll pivot over to what Ryan Sylvia from Rocky Top Insider. He had some notes about practice in his article that he released earlier today. He noted that when the two quarterbacks were having practice today, he felt that George had the better day throwing the ball in routes on air. He said Faison still looked good during that segment of practice, but he gave George the leg up. Although he thought Faison looked more accurate and better in the throws to coaches and simulated pressure, he felt that Faison was a little bit more accurate in some of that. Looked the George had the in routes on the air. He looked better, and then Faison looked more accurate with the simulated pressure. So obviously, first day of fall practice, you're not going to know who the starting quarterback is today. But it just shows that each quarterback is a little bit better maybe at something than the other quarterback, and maybe has a leg up on something. But I think that's good that you still see that both quarterbacks were competitive in the first day of practice, and Faison did something better than McIntyre did, and McIntyre did something better than Faison did. And when you look at the rest of the receiver room, he thought that the most impressive receiver today was Travis Smith Jr., which is a receiver that we talked about, a true sophomore this season. Only had 3 receptions for 29 yards last season, but is a guy that you expect to be, a piece in this receiving room this year. He also said that Tyreek King looked really good. And although Tyreek King is a true freshman and a local kid, he said today that playing for Tennessee and wearing the power tee, being a local kid, was kind of a dream come true for him. It's something that he grew up dreaming about. So I think that that's really cool. And, in an NIL era where a lot of guys want the money and the biggest bag of where they can go, I think it's cool that a player like Tyreek King, that went to high school right down the road, is excited to wear the Tennessee jersey and kind of represent his hometown off as a Tennessee Vol. And he thought that Tyreek King's hands were really impressive today. I think something that a lot of people thought about in Tyreek King's high school career was, the speed that he has and maybe some screen passes and kind of like a role of what maybe like a Zachariah Branch did at Georgia last season, where it's kind of blow by speed, or he can get downfield too for some of the deep routes. And obviously speed's going to be a massive factor for him, but I think it's also nice to see that Sylvia thought that he had good hands and was catching the ball well too. The mixture between, good hands and speed, that bodes well for your receiver room and for a receiver like him. He also noted that he felt that the offensive line looked more beefy with Derek Owens, and that was something that we talked about over the past few days, and something that I touched on earlier in the show is, this Derek Owens effect, I think, is the real deal. And I think that having an offensive line that looks more beefy a month out from the season, that's big. And you look at a David Sanders, he was also looking big today. And he'll move to a little bit of a different position on the offensive line this year, and more of an important piece on the left side, where you're kind of protecting the blind side of the quarterback. Obviously, that side in the NFL gets paid on the left side opposed to the right side. And with him moving to that side this year, former 5-star high school prospect, this is going to be his second year playing all the games, starting all the games. I think you're going to see a massive season from David Sanders. And we talked about on the playbook a couple weeks ago, Crane and Company from On3 Sports, they ranked David Sanders as, I believe it was the 5th or 6th most impactful player in the SEC this season. So that shows you how much even national media outlets believe that David Sanders could be an impact on this team. And I think the offensive line obviously is going to be a big factor with Tennessee this season. We've talked about how good the skill position is, the wide receiver room. Obviously, Deshaun Bishop, a guy that's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher for Tennessee as long as he stays healthy this season. You look at the tight end room headlined by an Ethan Davis. You have all the pieces on offense. And, if you hit on quarterback, you should have a good offense. And part of that is because of the part of that is because of the offensive line. The offensive line is going to be one of the better units in the SEC this season. And if you have a good offensive line, you could dominate at the line of scrimmage. You could run the ball effectively and efficiently. You can allow your young quarterback to not be in the pocket getting chased down and getting sacked every other play. You're going to give him time in the pocket to make correct reads, get through his progressions, run the ball effectively. Like I said, it's just going to help your offense as a whole with a young quarterback. So I think that that's massive when you look at the offensive line. Caleb, quickly, when you hear that the offensive line looks more beefy, how impactful do you think that is to the offense as a whole?
Yeah, I think it makes an already good unit just that much better. You've seen everything with Derek Owens, with how much bigger he's made guys. If you follow him on Instagram, you saw the pictures of Faison, you saw the pictures of Deshaun Bishop. But, offensive line, when you're already that big, it's a lot easier to put on weight. 20 pounds to an offensive lineman is a lot different than 20 pounds to a Faison Brandon. So it's nice to see. It's obviously expected just because of everything else you've seen out of him, but you love to see it.
Sylvia also noted that he didn't spend as much time on looking at the defensive side of the ball today, as he said that he was more interested kind of in the QB battle. And if you go look at the notes that he had from practice on his article, he basically charted every throw that Faison had during a live rep, every throw that Staub had during a live rep, every throw that McIntyre had during a live rep, who he threw it to, whether it was a Travis Smith, a Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley, whoever it was. If it was batted away, whoever the defensive back that made the play was, he noted if any catch was complete or incomplete. So very good work from Ryan Sylvia there. But he did say, looking at the defensive side of the ball, when he did make it over to that side of the field, he felt that Arion Carter looked really good and continues to be the leader of this team and the leader of this defense. Obviously, we spoke about the Arion Carter NCAA situation, the suspension of the first 2 games. Obviously, something we don't agree with, and obviously should not be suspended for those first 2 games for a $427 flight that was reimbursed with everything else that happens in college sports. It is kind of ridiculous that suspension occurred. But he said Arion Carter looked good, and he looked healthy. And with the turf toe that Arion Carter dealt with last season, I think that's awesome that he looks healthy, because he said his mobility looked fine. And to hear that Arion Carter's mobility looks fine a month out for the season, And Arion Carter will have about 6 weeks to prepare for the season because, as we said, he won't be playing those first 2 games of the year unless something changes here in the next month. But looking at game 3, when he starts against Kennesaw State, he'll have 1 game to get into it before he goes into the Texas game, week 4 in Neyland, which is going to be one of the most important games of the year. And to have, one of your defensive leaders look healthy in Arion Carter, I think that's massive. Caleb, how important is that Arion Carter is healthy and, you're not seeing any of these remnants from the turf toe? And not only is he going to be able to come back and be healthy, I think he's going to be extra hungry this year. This is a guy that probably with the injury and stuff obviously didn't get the news back from NFL teams that he wanted before the draft. That's why he returned back to college. But I think with this NCAA thing and the linebacker room and the entire team rallying around him, I would expect Arion Carter to have a big season this year. I think he's going to be pretty hungry with everything that he's gone through this offseason to have a big year on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously one of my concerns was his availability and his health going into this season. But from everything that I'm seeing, he seems to be full healthy, full go. And if he gets 6 more weeks, then that's just 6 more weeks to heal up any nagging, anything that he's got. So, yeah, I think this linebacker room, I've said it before, has the chance to be one of, if not the best in the SEC. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and obviously, AC has been a massive part of this team through the playoff in 2024. Obviously, last season dealt with some injuries, but everything that he is, what his girlfriend went through this offseason and how Arion Carter got involved with that and everything that Vol Twitter saw on social media this offseason. Arion Carter's a really good dude, and I think he's going to be able to come back from this suspension and be an even better player. And we talk about, all the pieces that you're going to have on defense and all the people that you brought in the secondary through the transfer portal, and you return a Ty Redmond and have a Kyan Lee coming in, in a lane, and you have a Quay Moss, TJ Metcalf. These are all guys that are going to be impactful. And you look at that linebacker room, it's going to be really good too. And Arion Carter has talked about at SEC Media Day, he wants to play kind of that linebacker edge rusher role where he's going to be able to do both because you don't really have anyone that's a true edge rusher outside of Jordan Norman that you think has the size. Obviously, you have some guys in that room, a Christian Gass that could potentially, be put into the fold to do that, but Gass still a young guy. I thought maybe earlier in the summer you might try an Edwin Spillman in kind of that role, but I think even Edwin Spillman might be a little bit small for the edge rusher role as well. So Arion Carter is going to be that guy that's going to be playing that hybrid linebacker edge role. And I think, you do have to have full health to do that. If you're coming off the edge, you got to have speed and agility. And obviously you have to be a smart player. And Arion Carter is as smart as anybody on this team. And I've said it over the past couple of days. I think the linebacker position in football on the defense is almost as important as the quarterback position is on offense in football. Obviously, the quarterback is the most important position in football, but the linebacker kind of tells everybody what's going on. The linebacker is always going to be the green dot guy that has helmet communication between the coaching staff and him, and he's going to be able to distribute that to the rest of the team. So I'm really excited to watch Arion Carter play. Unfortunately, it's going to be 2 weeks later than we would have expected. As I said, unless something changes, he won't be available until the Kennesaw State game. But really good things that you're hearing out of fall camp for the first day. Obviously, it's the first day of practice. You're not going to know anything about the QB battle until we get deeper into this. But it is nice to see the wide receiver room looks good. You have an offensive line unit that looks beefy. Most of your team has stayed healthy throughout the spring and throughout the summer. So I'm just excited to see what this team looks like for the next month before you get into the opening day against Furman on September 5th. But on the other side, we're going to get into some of the quotes that Josh Heupel had to say during his media availability today. Josh Heupel, obviously, sometimes as a coach gives a lot of coach speak, but I thought he gave some good tidbits and some good sound bites today that we'll get to on the other side. Stick with us here. It's Overtime on Fan Run Radio.
For the fans, by the fans. This is Fan Run Radio, Knoxville.
Blackford Veterinary Surgery Referral specializes in surgeries not regularly performed by your pet's general veterinarian. They're currently accepting referrals from vets all across the country. With their newly renovated state-of-the-art surgery center and highly trained staff, clients can rely on professional and thorough care. If your vet says that your pet needs surgery or rehab, Ask for a referral to Blackford Vet and let them get your best friend back on its feet. Located conveniently in West Knoxville. For more information, visit blackfordvetsurgery.com.
For over 3 years, Crumble Cookies has served the Knoxville area. From Clinton Highway to Parkside Drive, even our friends out in Maryville have reached you, our fans, with the best cookies in the game. This fall, Crumble is gearing up for yet another fantastic season. Whether you're tailgating or looking for a pick-me-up after getting the kids from school, Crumble has you covered. Download the Crumble app to check out this week's rewards and features. And stop on by. Tell them Fan Run sent you, but don't miss the cookies.
Golf Envy Farragut is the premier indoor golf experience you've been looking for. And right now they are offering a limited number of founding memberships. Golfers can reserve their spot for just $150 before their September grand opening. Founding members receive 90 days of unlimited guest passes, as well as an exclusive risk-free first month. That's right. Try out Golf Envy with no obligation. Give it 30 days, and if it's not the right fit for what you're looking for, your first month's dues will be refunded. Members will get access to their Golf Zone 2 Vision NX simulator technology, the most realistic simulator on the market, where they can play more than 300 courses and compete in leagues and tournaments with players all across the country. Golf, rain or shine, 24/7, 365. To learn more and become a founding member, visit their website at farragut.golfenvy.com/presale.
Running a business, coaching a team, planning your next big event, you need more than just gear. You need SM Athletics and Logo Solutions. Custom uniforms, branded apparel, promotional products, done right, done fast, and built to show off your brand with pride. From local businesses to high schools to major universities, SM Athletics is trusted by winners. Get real service, get real quality, get noticed. SM Athletics and Logo Solutions, where your brand comes to life.
Visit smathletics.com and let's build something great together.
All right, we're back here on Overtime here on Fan Run Radio. We appreciate the comments section. Joshy Boy says, Garrett, you do a really good job with the college football content. I appreciate that. I've seen Joshy Boy on my Twitter with some of the stuff that I post from the national college football level on my Twitter account. Appreciate the kind words there. And Music City Sam says, James Pierce broke out year 2. Any sophomore we have is capable at the edge. I agree. Anyone could break out. I'm just saying that I think that the edge room this season is depth-wise not as good as you've been over the past couple of seasons. You bring in a Jordan Norman from Tulane who had 6 sacks last season, a very good player. But, you had Jordan Ross. You kind of let him walk to LSU. And then a Chaz Coleman that you thought was going to be able to be impactful this season from Penn State. Everything throughout the offseason that transpires there happens, and now he's no longer a part of your team. So, you really only have one guy on your roster that's played true edge snaps before and has, had efficient success at that. So I'm not saying that the edge room's not good or it can't be good. I'm just saying that so far, the snaps that you've had at the edge position, Jordan Norman is the main guy that's done that. He did it 2 years at South Alabama and then 1 year at Tulane. And I think Jordan Norman's going to be a big piece of this Tennessee defense coming off the edge. We'll get into some of the quotes that Josh Heupel had with the media today that he shared with today's first full practice this fall. And one of the questions was on if it's difficult as a coach to be patient and let the Tennessee quarterback battle play out. I think this is an interesting question to ask Josh Heupel because Josh Heupel was a quarterback himself, obviously, at Oklahoma, and a very good one. And Josh Heupel, obviously, in his playing career had quarterback battles that he went through, especially early in his career. And so I think it's cool to have a head coach that has been through those quarterback battles, himself as a player and then now as a coach. He's obviously had multiple quarterback battles in his time at Tennessee, most notably the Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton battle in 2021. And then you come into this battle here this season. So I think it is good to have a coach that's kind of gone through those battles as a player and a coach. But when he was asked about that, he said, we do analyze every throw, every practice, the read, fundamental, the technique. Absolutely. I think you're looking at every individual play. There's areas of growth, and you want to see your quarterbacks. It's true for every player. Just continue to get better. And I said it yesterday, but guys that keep making the same mistake twice, the third time, that's when I get concerned. It's a player's responsibility to learn, earn it, take it, improve. He's going to play at a championship level. And to do that, to get to that point, you got to be able to progress from day to day, rep to rep. And I think that was something that I talked about in the first segment. I think whoever wins this quarterback battle is whoever has the highest ceiling and whoever has the better mental ability to not let a play rattle him. You can't, as a young quarterback, throw an interception and let that play into your next drive. If you throw an interception, it's not ideal, but it's going to happen. Every quarterback throws interceptions. Even the best quarterback in college football last year, Fernando Mendoza, threw interceptions. Even Trinidad Chambliss threw interceptions last year. Even Arch Manning threw interceptions last year. It's part of being a quarterback. It happens. You have to be able to flush the previous drive out and move on to the next drive. And he said that whoever, gets better during camp, obviously that's important too. So while I do think Faison has the edge coming into fall camp right now, that's not to say that George couldn't get a lot better here. George has put on weight too, just like Faison has. And maybe McIntyre has a really good fall camp and wows people and surprises people. But I think it is important as the quarterback to just continue to get better every rep, every practice, every day, and then once you get into the season, every game. And especially if Faison does win this battle, he's a guy that was a 5-star, the number 1 quarterback in the country in high school. This is a guy that you have for your future, could be your quarterback for 3 straight seasons. And so if he's your quarterback, this fall and he makes mistakes in the Texas game early in the season, or maybe a couple mistakes in the Georgia Tech game, again, you have to flush those out and you have to be able to have the ability to move on to the next page, because you can't let those same mistakes happen when you're playing Alabama at home late in the season. You can't let those mistakes happen when you're playing Kentucky at home in November. You can't let those mistakes happen when you're playing LSU at home late in the season that could be a massive game, or a Vanderbilt that you want to get revenge after last season. So I think it's just important for each player, each quarterback to get better. Like I said, every rep, every practice, and every game, and that ultimately makes you better for 2027. Caleb, when you hear Josh Heupel say something like this, and I talk about obviously Heupel, a quarterback himself, how impactful do you think that is, that he's a guy that's also gone through this type of competition himself 25 years ago when he was playing at Oklahoma, now to being the coach? Do you think he has something, a keen eye to be able to see things and obviously certain mistakes playing the position himself?
Absolutely. I mean, you already knew that Heupel during his time here has kind of established himself as a player's coach, and I think this is a big part of it, and I think this is why he's so good with quarterbacks, is because he's able to relate to quarterbacks on a different level than any other coach is. I mean, it's a different world out there being a quarterback, and he's able to relate to these guys on a really close level.
Well, another interesting thing that I thought that Heupel talked about during the media availability was he was talking about who is working at punt return other than Tyreek King. Tyreek King, obviously a young freshman wide receiver, might not completely get the ability to play in the wide receiver position this season with such a deep room, but a lot of these kids that are 4 or 5-star talents out of high school that don't play freshman year, maybe on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, they can really make a mark in special teams. So I think he's a guy that could be a punt returner this year. He said, got a bunch of guys that are competing for that spot. Quay Moss, Staley was back there for some last year. Mike Matthews, there's a bunch of them. You got to have a guy that's fearless, dynamic playmaker, that's an aggressive but smart decision maker. Once he has the ball in his hands, is able to be able to make somebody miss. It's one of the plays in the game that can be as explosive play as there is. And I think this is an interesting question that was asked because, I think special teams is something that's overlooked a lot. And I think you got better on special teams this season. You went out and got Cooper Revere, who's going to be your starting kicker this season from Louisville, and he's got length. He can go up to 60 yards that you've seen him practice before. And this is a guy that comes in with some charisma, and I think that's going to be exciting to watch because Gilbert last season, while I think Gilbert was kind of hated on by the fan base maybe a little bit more than he should have been, he wasn't exactly the clutchest kicker. And you saw that in the Georgia game. It affected you. Now, the penalties that led up to that moment, I think, were just as impactful as the missed kick. But, at the end of the day, when your job is to make field goals, you got to be able to make a field goal from inside 40 yards for your team to be able to knock off a top 5, top 10 team at home like that. But I think special teams can make a big impact in the punting, and special teams punt returns and kick returns as well. Boo Carter was a guy last season coming into the season you thought was going to be an electric factor with punt returning. And Boo Carter was a guy that didn't really do anything for you punt returning last season. Pretty much just fair caught the ball anytime he was put out there. And I think he almost kind of did that in a protest last season. And so you didn't have a guy that you felt could return punts at as an effective rate as you would have liked last season. You saw that in the Oklahoma game. He had a couple times where he had lots of space in front of him, and he just called a fair catch. And you go back to 2023, D. Williams in that Texas A&M game, he returned that punt. I believe it was in the second or third quarter, and that was a massive swing in the game. There was not very many points scored in that game, and that punt return was basically the play that won you the game. So I think whoever it is, this returning punts this season, an electric factor at punt return is very important, Caleb, when you look at these guys that could be returning punts this season. Just how important is it that you have someone that can have that electric factor and has the ability to turn up field and make some guys miss? And, a guy that can take a couple back for 6 on punt returns throughout the season, that can be huge for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like that's kind of overshadowed when it comes to returning kicks, is that's more important almost than anything else, is just just how electric of a return man are you. That's a good punt return or a good kickoff return. It really can swing the course of a game. I mean, it's not something to be overlooked. You got electric guys that came through here, whether it's Cordell Patterson or Evan Berry. Like, you've had some absolute world-class kick returners come through here, and last year was a little bit of a letdown, but hopefully this year we can get it turned around.
Yeah, and obviously, like I said, I mean, a punt return touchdown can really be, it can change the feel of the game, and you had a lot of guys that kind of return punts and kicks last season, obviously without Boo kind of being the guy that you wanted him to be, and obviously Mike Matthews can do that. Staley was a guy that did it a little bit last season. Quay Moss, I believe, did that while he was at Kansas State, obviously coming off the defensive side of the ball. So there was a lot of guys that you saw doing it last season for Tennessee too. I remember DeJuan Morris was someone that returned a few kicks throughout the season. I remember in the Syracuse game, he was someone that was back there, but I think he was more of a kick return specialist. But punt return, it's important to have someone that can be explosive and do that. So I'm excited to see who kind of takes over that role. Another thing that I thought was interesting was Heupel noted that Ty Redmond and Mike Matthews, he thinks that there's still a little bit of meat on the bone for leadership roles, but is proud of the steps that they've made this year. And we talk about on the defensive side of the ball, there's going to be a lot of leaders in that room. There's going to be an Amari Campbell who's been a part of this Jim Knowles defense before at linebacker. There's going to be an Arion Carter that's been a guy that's been part of this Tennessee team for a long time. And then you have some of these other guys that have played considerable amounts of collegiate snaps. A Kyan Lee coming over from Auburn that's going to be a starting corner this season. A Quay Moss that comes over from Kansas State that played starting snaps last season. A TJ Metcalf that played starting snaps at Michigan last season. A DeJuan Lane who played starting snaps at Penn State last season. There's tons of guys that are going to be in this room that are going to be able to have leadership roles. But I think being able to have a Ty Redmond take over a leadership role this season is big too, because a lot of those transfers that you bring in, they're out of eligibility after this season. They won't be able to play. And Ty Redmond obviously played very good as a true freshman last year. I think Ty Redmond is a guy that could be an all-SEC corner by the end of this season. And then you go into 2027 when you have a lot of these guys that you've touted as young players now, him, a Gabriel Ascenda, David Sanders. These guys are going to be juniors by the time, sophomores and juniors by the time you get into that 2027 season. So I think it is important and nice to see Ty Redmond be able to have a leadership role. And then you look at Mike Matthews, a guy on the offensive side of the ball. I would look at Deshaun Bishop as the main leader on the offensive side of the ball, a guy that was a Knoxville guy, went to Carnes High School, worked his tail off and got a walk-on here, and now is on scholarship and was a 1,000-yard rusher, and I expect to be a 1,000-yard rusher again this season. And he's someone that we're going to talk about in the second hour that has the ability with a really impressive season this year to break an all-time Tennessee rushing record. But you look at Deshaun Bishop, and he's the guy that he's pretty much been in the weight room and at church this offseason. He's been getting his mind correct, and he's been getting his body correct. And that was something that you saw today as well. Deshaun Bishop, he looks like he's put on a lot of weight too, and he's a guy that was already tough to tackle, a guy that sometimes it takes 2-3 guys to be able to put Bishop down on the ground. He looks like a guy that might even be able to put it into another gear this season, and I think is going to be extremely important on the offensive side of the ball. But if you can have some of these receivers be able to take over a leadership role, whether that is a Braylon Staley or a Mike Matthews, I think that's important because you have a lot of younger receivers on this team. And we've talked about those guys too, and maybe that becomes a Travis Smith Jr. or a Darius Jackson in the future. But Caleb, when you look at this, do you think that it's important to have maybe some of these younger guys like a Ty Redmond? Obviously, Mike Matthews has been here for a little bit now, but how important is it for those guys to have leadership roles on their respective side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultra important no matter what sport you're talking about. It's kind of just the fundamentals of being a part of a team is you got to have guys step up and be leaders. And when you got younger guys that step up and step into those leadership roles, that's amazing. That's what you like to see. You don't always want it to be just the seniors or the older guys. You want the younger guys to be able to step up and be able to have a voice like that as well.
Yeah, and I think obviously having leadership roles on your team is important, and especially when you're going through, a little bit of staff turnover on the defensive side of the ball with Jim Knowles now coming in for Tim Banks. You have guys on the defensive side of the ball that were part of that Tim Banks staff last season that will be starting this year, whether that is a Ty Redmond or whether that is an Arion Carter. And then you have guys that come over from Penn State that were a part of the unit before, whether that's DeJuan Lane or whether that is an Amari Campbell, whoever that may be. And, we've talked about this offseason too. People have said this system with Jim Knowles sometimes takes a couple years to be put into place. But I think with you having, the older players on your roster mainly being on the defensive side of the ball and especially guys that have been a part of that Penn State defense before with Knowles, I think that makes the transition here at Tennessee a little bit easier. And I do think that helps some of the younger guys because you have younger guys like a Perlotti that I think is going to break out this season. You saw him have some really good plays last season. A Farouk at safety, a guy that I think is another breakout guy. Farouk has obviously been here for a little bit as well, but I think it just helps to have these older voices on the team and guys that have been a part of a Jim Knowles defense before and guys that have been a part of a Tennessee locker room before kind of interject and intercept thoughts with one another. And I think that's going to create what will be a pretty good defense here. On the other side, though, we'll shift to the basketball court. Is Zakai Ziegler in the news today? He's wondering why the NCAA is now allowing these 5-and-5 rules for these guys. And if you played in high school from 2016 to 2020, you got the COVID year. But unfortunately, if you were in high school and graduated the year Zakai Ziegler did in 2021, you're kind of out of luck. We'll discuss Zakai Ziegler and his lawsuit on the other side. Stick with us. It's overtime here on Fan Run Radio.
Your tax refund belongs to you, not an identity thief. Over $6 billion in tax refunds were flagged by the IRS for possible identity theft last year. If you're in a bind this tax season, LifeLock can help. They monitor and alert you to identity threats you'd miss on your own, even if you're careful with your personal information. And if you do become a victim of tax-related identity fraud, LifeLock has U.S.-based restoration specialists ready to help solve your identity theft issue. Plus, all LifeLock plans are backed by the $1 Million Protection Package, meaning LifeLock will reimburse you up to the limits of your plan if you lose money due to identity theft. Let LifeLock help protect your financial info, so all you have to worry about is what you do with your tax refund. Go to LifeLock.com, save up to 25% off your first year. The promo code is HERD, promo code HERD, to save up to 25% off your first year. LifeLock.com. Identity theft protection starts here.
Are you ready for the start of a new season? Maybe looking for your team to go on a tournament run? Get game day ready with Crumble. Head on over to your nearest location and pick up 12 pre-selected cookies plus exclusive toppers. When you're looking for dessert options, there's no question about who you should call on. Our listeners already know. Last year, the Dubai chocolate was a home run, along with the brownie batter. Oreo crumb was another crowd favorite. What new flavor will set the standard this season? If you're in the Knoxville area, there are 3 locations ready to serve you: Clinton Highway, Parkside Drive, and Maryville. Download the Crumble app to build your best lineup and vote on the best combos. You can even put your bid in to request a new flavor. Order in the app and slide on over to your nearest location. Tell them Fan Run sent you, and as always, it's for the fans, by the fans. Don't miss the cookies.
September 10th isn't just a sale, it's an experience. Join us as Liquor Vault celebrates its first anniversary with the biggest savings event of the year. Experience rare bourbon drops, surprising barrel releases, and complimentary tastings all day. For the wine enthusiasts, you can check out Jason Drotar's Wine Passport Experience. Cigars, they've got them too. Enjoy hourly giveaways, exclusive one-day only anniversary pricing, and surprises throughout the day. Find a Vault Golden ticket and receive exclusive access to Liquor Vault's highly anticipated end-of-year rare bourbon allocation. People will be talking about this event for months. The only question is, will you be there? The Vault Experience, September 10th, only at Liquor Vault's anniversary party. Located at 2901 Tazewell Pike. Check out their specials and sign up to get discounts at liquorvault.com.
All right, back here on Overtime, here on Fan Run Radio. We appreciate you spending your Wednesday evening with us and hanging out with us. Lots of talk on Tennessee first day of practice today for football as we're a month out from the college football season starting for Tennessee. As we're all itching to get back into Neyland Stadium, September 5th, Tennessee versus Furman. But we're going to shift gears a little bit to the hardwood and talk a little Zakai Ziegler back in the news today, and rightfully so. He's obviously a little bit mad with the way some of this NCAA stuff has gone down. Feels like, it's not fair that he didn't get the 5-5 rule that looks like could potentially be happening to college athletes now. And Zakai Ziegler, not someone that I need to introduce to any Tennessee fan. Everybody knows Zakai Ziegler's story, and underrated kid out of the Bronx that Rick Barnes found kind of late in the recruiting process and brought Ziegler in, and Ziegler made an immediate impact as a freshman, averaged right around 10 points per game as a freshman, and really one of the best defenders, I'd say, in Tennessee basketball program history. Just one of those guys that was a hard worker every single day and kind of the epitome of what the Rick Barnes era in Tennessee basketball has been. But Zakai, obviously now playing professional basketball over in France, had an opportunity in the NBA Summer League again this summer. Didn't necessarily go exactly the way that he would have wanted to, but obviously still continuing to play professional basketball overseas. But last summer filed a lawsuit against the NCAA calling for an extra year of eligibility, calling for the 5-5 rule. And unfortunately, the courts did not side with him last summer. But now a year later, it sounds like this eligibility model might be changing to the 5-5 model, which we've talked about it from the football side of things, where you have some of these guys that might have been signed as undrafted free agents, might have been in NFL mini camps that could potentially be coming back to play college football. And you've heard some of these players like Thomas Castellanos, who was the quarterback at Florida State last year, Desmond Reed, who was at Pitt last year, they're starting running back. These are guys that weren't good enough to play in the NFL and now are saying, well, I might come back and play college football again. And Zakai Ziegler's kind of saying, well, how come I can't do that? And it leaves Zakai in a tough spot because if you graduate high school from 2016 to 2020, obviously you would have got the COVID year because the COVID outbreak started March of 2020. And so if you especially were an athlete of a spring sport in 2020, your season you didn't even get to finish it. And then if you were a fall athlete in 2020, football was completely different. You played, most conferences played between a 6 and 8 game schedule, and it was completely different. So you got your COVID year, and then now they're doing it where if you were a 2022 athlete, you get the 5-5 rule. Well, that leaves Zakai Ziegler, who was a 2021 graduate, kind of right in the middle of these in a tough spot because Zakai Ziegler played 4 years of college basketball and was impactful freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. Obviously, he had the injury against Arkansas during his career where he ended up missing the end of that season, but he never really medically redshirted. He never redshirted his freshman year or anything like that. So once his 4 years were done, his career was over. And there's not many guys in collegiate sports that do it the right way like that, like Ziegler did anymore, where they play freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and then once their 4 years is over, it's up. And I think that's how college sports should still be. I'm not a huge fan of the 6th and even sometimes 7th year players that you're seeing in college sports. I just don't think 24, 25-year-olds should be playing collegiate sports, and especially college football and college basketball. And you even see it a little bit in college baseball. But as a result, Ziegler filed an amended lawsuit against the NCAA seeking $12 million in damages, according to Knox News' Stephen Thompson, who first reported this yesterday. And Ziegler claimed in his original lawsuit that he stood to earn up to $4 million playing college basketball during the 2025-2026 season. And the lawsuit seeks triple the compensation that Ziegler believes he could have made playing college basketball his last season. And what I make of this is I understand where Ziegler's coming from, and I do love Ziegler and everything that Zakai did for our program. But at the same time, as much as I hate to say it, I do think Zakai maybe needs to move on from this a little bit. He's playing professional basketball overseas and still has an opportunity over there. And it is unfair what happened to him. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the way that the cookie crumbled. And the way that the NCAA works right now, there's not a whole lot of things that make sense. And, I don't really see him winning this. I think, he obviously would have made it money in NIL if he were to have come back. But, Caleb, when you look at something like this, where do you stand on it? Obviously, I see Zakai's side of where he's coming from. But at the other side, I'm not saying it's bad that he's doing this, but at the other side, I do think it might be better to just kind of move on and put this in the past. He's obviously not going to ever be coming back and suiting up for the orange and white again and playing basketball. But I do understand, monetarily with money, why, he is trying to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. If I was looking down and being able to potentially get $12 million, I mean, I'd probably go ahead and file the lawsuit too. But I'm kind of with you. I think at this point, we're coming up on the second season with Zal Zakai. I think as much as I love him, much as he was one of my favorite UT players, I think he just kind of needs to move on from the situation and just understand that some things, I don't know. So sometimes you just got to move on.
Yeah, well, and it's a tough place for him because obviously Zakai, we know how much that he meant to the Tennessee basketball program. Obviously, I'm a student at the University of Tennessee with one semester left. The early part of my time at Tennessee, Zakai Ziegler was, one of my favorite players at Tennessee. And someone like me that's in my young 20s, I would say over the past few years, like Hendon Hooker, Zakai Ziegler, and Hunter Ensley have probably been, my three favorite athletes at Tennessee. I just felt like those three guys kind of embodied what it meant to be a Tennessee Volunteer, whether it was, Hendon Hooker during 2022, everything that he did for the football program as you were coming back and, starting to get national relevance again and starting to win again. I guess relevance isn't the right word. You've always been relevant with the brand that you have, or relevant with the brand that you have, but, starting to win games again. And Hendon Hooker was obviously one of the main parts of that. And basketball, Zakai Ziegler, just everything that he did from a kid that was under-recruited to Rick Barnes giving him a chance to play and being one of the best point guards in Tennessee Vols history, the ability to defend, full court pressure, get to the rack. And even though he was usually the smallest guy in the court, had the biggest heart and had, as much care in the world as anybody. And then obviously a Hunter Ensley, a guy that put his body on the line to win a College World Series. Those are the type of guys that I think Vols fans love and will continue to support throughout the rest of their careers and whatever they do for the rest of their lives. And so I think that's why a lot of people, are on Zakai's side here. But at the same time, like Caleb said, maybe it is time to kind of move on from the situation. And not that he's ever going to tarnish anything, but you had such a great career at Tennessee. I understand you want your money, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, anyone that graduated high school in 2021 is in the same situation. And Zakai wasn't the only player that graduated high school in 2021 and played all 4 years of college and then went on to play professional basketball. So, like I said, unfortunately, just kind of the way that the cookie crumbled with what happened with COVID and now this 5-5 rule. And we're not even 100% sure what happens with the 5-5 rule. I think the NCAA is definitely going to try and get in court and say we're not doing this, but we'll have to see how it goes over the next couple months. On the other side, we'll go back to college football from the national side, and we'll talk who some national title contenders are. LSU, Indiana, Texas, Georgia, Miami. We'll discuss who we think they are and if any of these teams are fraudulent and who maybe some of the teams that people aren't talking about could be national title contenders. We'll have it for you on the other side in the second hour. It's overtime here on Fan Run Radio. Stick with us.
Follow us on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days at Fox Sports Knox. Fox Sports Knoxville. Fan Run Radio.
Located in Knoxville's historic Old City, Barley's offers great food, live music, the best draft beer selection in town, and now your new favorite place to watch sports. Their indoor projector is perfect for any weather, and they've revamped their upstairs area with more TVs to take in all of the action. Their menu features hand-battered chicken tenders, juicy burgers, fresh salads, and the tastiest pizza in Knoxville. You can enjoy their happy hour drink specials daily from open until 6 p.m. Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Go ahead, feel your engine. Admire that perfectly installed exhaust. Your vehicle's moving along this freeway like it was made from fresh installs and a whole lot of love. With eBay Motors, you get over 122 million parts to keep it running. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, they'll be the perfect fit every time. Plus, at these prices, well, we're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Hi, this is Bo Kregner from the Kregner Group at Realty Executives, and I know there's a lot of choices here in East Tennessee when it comes to choosing a realtor. Here's why the Kregner Group is different. At the Kregner Group, our motto is walking by faith, serving others. It's how I live my life. It's how I run my business. Here at the Kregner Group, we're committed to doing real estate the right way. Faith, honesty, integrity. The Kregner Group. Call me anytime at 865-742-1035 or visit my website at boknowshouses.com.
You're listening to FM 105.7 and AM 1340, WKGN Knoxville and W289CU Knoxville, Fan Run Radio.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jacob Wilco at Knoxville Smiles. Have you ever wanted to improve the look of your smile? We know firsthand what the power of a great smile means to a person's confidence and health. Our team of doctors can provide you with an array of options for helping you achieve your cosmetic goals. From simply moving teeth into a better position, to reversible cosmetic bonding, to full mouth implant-supported dentures. It is our goal to help patients feel good about their appearance while achieving optimal health. Want to learn more? Call us at 865-539-1776 to schedule an evaluation or visit us online at knoxvillesmiles.com.
All right, we're back here, hour number 2, getting started here on Overtime. We appreciate you hanging out with us and spending your Wednesday afternoon here on Fan Run Radio. And that's the type of music that gets you ready for the college football season. You know, when you're a kid or even into your teens, you count down the days till Christmas morning and, the days till your birthday. You get to open up your gifts and all the things that happen during those days. But when you get to be 22 years old, like me and like myself and Caleb and I, you start counting down the days till week 0 of the college football season, where you get to sit on your couch and watch 5 different football games at once and have action on the games and tweeting about the games and doing everything you do to cover the greatest sport on earth. And we're only 24 days away from week 0 getting underway. And every year, you go into the college football season and you feel like there's contenders. You feel like there's, usually 5 or 6 teams going into the season that you feel like have a legitimate shot to win the national championship. And then you obviously have some of the dark horse teams that start the season maybe around ranked 10th to 11th. But I think with the transfer portal, you can see teams really change things quickly. And obviously the biggest, impact of that has been Indiana and Kirk Cignetti, a team that took the losingest Power 4 team in history to a team that won a national championship in his second year on the job and went 16-0 and was one of the greatest college football teams in history and was dominant in most every game that they played last season outside of, maybe a couple. Iowa kept it close with them. Ohio State kept it close with them in the Big Ten championship, but a team that demolished an Alabama team full of 4 and 5 stars at the Rose Bowl. So it shows you that, you can get guys out of the portal and you can win quick if you have the right coach. And so I look at this season, I think there's probably 8 or 9 teams that have a legitimate chance to win the national title. Some have a better chance, I think, than others. I think there's 3 or 4 teams that I look at and say these teams have the best roster in college football. But at the end, Clemson, I thought, had a chance to win the national title last year. And I also thought Penn State had a really good roster last season. And that ended up with a coach being fired and the 2 teams playing in the Bad Boy Motors Bowl in wherever that was, New York City last year. 2 6-6 teams playing in the hail and sleet 5 days before Christmas. Not exactly the college football playoff and national championship implications for those teams. So while you can't have a good roster's not everything. So we're going to go through a little exercise. I have about 6 teams that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to list the team off. And I'll do most of the talking as Caleb is feeling a little bit under the weather, but I'll ask for some input from him as well. And we'll talk about if these teams have a chance to win the national title or not this season. And we're going to start off with the defending champs in Indiana. And Indiana, I know, loses Fernando Mendoza, obviously the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, the Heisman Trophy winner. You could make the argument he was the best player in college football last season. But you look at this Indiana team and what they did through the transfer portal. they lost a lot of pieces last season after the year. They lost Surratt to the draft. They lost Omar Cooper in their wide receiver room. They lost a couple of their running backs. On the defensive side of the ball, they lost one of the best corners in the country in D'Angelo Pons. But they loaded up in the transfer portal this season, and they went out, and I believe that their offensive line is better than last season. And with Turbo Richard at running back coming over from Boston College, I think they probably have a better running back room with him and Kobe Martin than they did last season. And they had a pretty good good running back room too last year, but I think it's even better this year. And Beebe also in that room as well, another really good running back. But you look at the quarterback position, everyone is saying, well, Josh Hoover, he's turnover prone. He throws way too many interceptions. And while I do think at TCU last year he did throw more interceptions than you would like, he also threw for 3,000 yards and 20-plus touchdowns and has the ability to spread the offense and throw the ball around the park. And I think Josh Hoover is a really good quarterback. I think he's going to eliminate turnovers in his game with Curt Cignetti as his head coach. You saw last season Fernando Mendoza. He was a good quarterback at Cal. He threw for 3,000 yards in 2024 at Cal and had a pretty low interception rate. But I don't think anyone expected Fernando Mendoza to be the number one pick in the NFL draft preseason last year, and I definitely don't think anyone thought Fernando Mendoza was going to win the Heisman last season. So if there's any coach that can turn a quarterback from, a B+ player to an A+ player, I think it's Curt Cignetti. You look at the wide receiver room. They have Charlie Becker coming back, a guy that people had never even heard of until probably the 7th or 8th game of the year. He had the incredible game against Penn State when they won at the end of the game. He comes back. You have a Nick Marsh that comes over from Michigan State, who was one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten last year. A Chaz Preston that was one of the best receivers in the group of 5 at Tulane last season. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. And they bring over tons of pieces there, and they return a Elijah Hardy, a Tyreek Tucker, and Amari Farrell, and they bring over an A.J. Harris from Penn State, who I think will get back to his 2024 form, who was formerly at Georgia. They have all the players on this team where I can make the argument. I said this on Twitter yesterday. I think this team, roster-wise, is just as impressive as the team was last season. And obviously, I didn't expect Indiana to go 16-0 last season, and I'm not saying that Indiana is going to go back-to-back and win the national championship again. I'm not saying that they go 12-0 in the Big Ten, but I would be very surprised if Indiana is not at a 10-2, 11-1 team with Big Ten title implications and could play for a national championship again next season if everything goes right. I just think Curt Cignetti is that good of a coach. And if your only question mark with the roster is if Josh Hoover is a good enough quarterback that threw for 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns, I think you're a little bit crazy because I don't think he's going to be forced to make the throws that he had to make in the TCU offense last year. I think they're going to be able to run the ball more effectively than TCU's offense did last season. And I think he's just overall in a better situation. He's definitely going to have a defense that's going to be able to bail him out a little bit better. And I think that the front that Indiana is going to have on the defensive side of the ball, they got Stephen Daly back yesterday, who led the Big Ten in tackles for loss last season and had 5.5 sacks, who got injured in the celebration of the Big Ten championship game. And they weren't even with him he wasn't even with them for the playoffs. He'll be back again this season. I just look at Indiana and think that they have a tremendous shot to go back-to-back. I know it's rare. You don't see it very often, but you saw Georgia do it. Georgia did it in 2021 and 2022. And I think Indiana has a real shot at doing it again. They're not my national title favorites, but again, I'd be shocked if they're not one of the last 4 teams or at least one of the last 8 teams standing. And I really do think this roster is as good as last season. Caleb, how would you assess the Hoosiers offseason, and what do you think the ceiling is for this Indiana team? Do you think they could go back-to-back?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a pretty good amount yesterday. I think this Indiana team has every tool at their disposal to go out and win another national title. I think they have a better roster than they do last season. They have a better talent compository than they did going into last season. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why this team can't win another one.
Well, we'll pin our way over to the SEC, where we're going to look at a team that a lot of people have bought stock in this season, an LSU. They might not be a team, obviously, that has the highest national title odds or anything like that. They're not going to be a top 5 betting favorite, but they're a team that a lot of people are very high on in the SEC, and they're a team that people think could be a dark horse to potentially maybe even win the SEC. I think a lot of people do expect them if they don't make the playoff with Lane Kiffin. After everything that went down over the past couple seasons with Brian Kelly, with the recruiting that you have in Louisiana, one of the best high school recruiting states, and the portal warrior that Lane Kiffin is, he found his starting quarterback last year, Trinidad Chambliss from D2 Ferris State. So this guy knows how to work wonders in the transfer portal. And I think LSU is going to be a really good team this season. And I think when LSU comes to Neyland in the second to last week of the year, that LSU-Tennessee game could have massive implications for the playoff. I think there's a world where if Tennessee plays to their best of their abilities, both of those teams could be 8-2 going into that game. And if you take care of business against Vanderbilt, maybe even Tennessee could slide into the playoff if everything goes right. I still stand firm that Tennessee's probably an 8-4, 9-3 team. But if you can steal a game against a Texas and do what you're supposed to against Alabama, this LSU game could be massive at the end of the season. And I look at this LSU team, and they're pretty loaded on their roster. The wide receiver room is as good as anybody in the country. They bring in a Winston Watkins. They bring in a Jackson Harris, who was one of the leading yard receivers in the country at Hawaii last season. Jace Brown, who was incredible at Kansas State. Trey Brown, he was really good at Old Dominion last year. Eugene Wilson, he comes over from Florida. Plenty of guys in this wide receiver room. And then you go and look at the quarterback. You have a Sam Levitt who comes over from Arizona State, led Arizona State to the college football playoff in 2024. And obviously, he wasn't the only piece. Cam Scattaboo was a massive piece to that offense. Jordan Tyson, there were plenty of other pieces on that 2024 Arizona State offense. But I think Sam Levitt's still a really good quarterback. And you look at the running back room of Caden Durham and Harlan Berry, two highly rated guys out of high school that LSU has. It's going to be a really good offense. You look at the defensive side of the ball. They bring over a Princewell from Ole Miss. Obviously, a little bit of a cat on the keyboard on the last name, but he was a really good player coming off the edge for Ole Miss last season. They bring over a TJ Darty. He was a really good linebacker last season. Ty Benfield, he was an incredible safety at Boise State last year, and I think that he can bring his game from the Mountain West over to the SEC this season. My question mark with LSU is two things. A, with this much roster turnover and this many transfer portal additions on a team, can you develop team chemistry in time? You've seen teams do it, but you've also seen teams that have rosters like this with so many new pieces where it hasn't gone too well for them the next season. Florida State had a ton of new pieces a couple years ago, and they were awful. And Florida State has been terrible the past few seasons. And as a result, Mike Norvell is on the hot seat going into this year. And the other part of this equation is Lane Kiffin. I don't like Lane Kiffin. I think what he did to Ole Miss, leaving them in the middle of a college football playoff run, was pretty deplorable. I don't really respect him for what he did there. I don't respect Lane Kiffin for what he's done throughout his coaching career at a lot of places. The one thing is he's an offensive guru, and he's a really good coach, and he can win football games. The issue is Lane Kiffin is also as aggressive as any coach in the country. If it's 4th and 1 from his own 30, he might go for it. If it's 4th and 8 late in the game, instead of punting, he might go for it. And I think sometimes those mistakes that happen in those situations, those come back to bite Lane Kiffin. They came back and bited him when he was at Ole Miss multiple times. And I think that was part of the reason why you saw Ole Miss beat Georgia last season. Even with Pete Golding as the coach in the college football playoff game in that Sugar Bowl, I think there were a lot of opportunities where Lane Kiffin probably would have said on 4th down, we're going to go for it here. And Pete Golding said, no, we're going to kick the field goal. Obviously, Ole Miss's kicker in the Sugar Bowl had an incredible game. But I think, Pete Golding is a little bit more of a safe coach than Lane Kiffin is. And I just think sometimes those aggressive, hyper-aggressive, plays that Lane Kiffin tries to have come back and bite him. That's his personality. That's who Lane Kiffin is. Lane Kiffin, is kind of on the wild side of life. That's how he lives. But I do think it could come back to bite them in some situations. I'm going to say LSU's a fringe playoff team. I think they're going to go 9-3 this season, and I think they barely missed the playoffs, so I don't have them as any type of dark horse national championship team. I think they have a really good roster, but I just think too much roster turnover, and I just don't know that you can trust Lane Kiffin late in the season in some of these do-or-die situations. Caleb, when you look at LSU, is LSU a team that you're buying stock in this season, or are you with me? LSU is going to be a good team in the SEC, but probably a game short of the college football playoff.
LSU is a confusing team for me when I look at them because when you take a team of like this where you're bringing in so many guys out of the transfer portal, you really have to have like a rock solid culture, like a Kurt Cignetti does in Indiana. And I don't know if Lane Kiffin really has that kind of rock solid culture because he's had he's had phenomenal teams at Ole Miss. He's had really, really talented teams at Ole Miss, and it's done little to nothing with it. I mean, he led them to one playoff and didn't even coach in the playoff game. And I think a lot of those Ole Miss teams were better than this LSU team. So it's kind of difficult to say. I'm going to stick with what I've stayed with the whole year, that I think they're going to be like an 8-4, 9-3 type of team. And I personally think that we should be able to beat them when they come in here, when they come into Knoxville. But it's a difficult team for me because they could go 11-1 and I wouldn't be surprised. But if I had to put any kind of money on it, I'd say probably 8-4, 9-3.
We'll move on to another SEC team in Texas. And Texas is a team I'm buying a lot of stock in. I said it earlier in the summer, Texas is my pick to win the national championship. Maybe that's a little bit bold with Sark because I think that there's a handful of coaches, probably a lot of coaches in college football that are better coaches than Sark. Sark can recruit, and Sark can get players to believe and come to Texas. But Sark in the red zone inside the 20s is also sometimes one of the worst coaches I've seen of a power program. He lost the game against Ohio State in the playoffs in 2024 from a bad red zone drive. And over the past few years, there's been some questionable play calling that he's had. For a guy that is known as, everyone says he's the best play caller in college football. I question that sometimes inside the 20s. I think he's a very good coach, but I don't know that I'd necessarily say that he's an elite head coach. And so for those reasons, it does make me a little bit weary, but I just think that their roster is so good. And I think that they're going to be able to beat Ohio State the second week of the season. Last year, that was a slop fest where there were hardly any points scored, and Arch Manning couldn't hit the side of a barn. And, Ohio State won that game because of their defense, and Texas stayed in the game with their defense too. But I think there's definitely going to be more points scored in that game this season. But I look at this Texas team, and they're loaded on the offensive side of the ball. I think Arch Manning, however you want to say it, Arch Manning is a top 3 quarterback returning in college football. If you want to say he's first, second, third, that's fine. I think most people that watch college football would agree him, Trinidad Chambliss, and Dante Moore are the top 3 quarterbacks returning to college football this season. You look at the wide receiver room. They go out and get Cam Coleman, one of the best wide receivers of the country from Auburn last season. They get Ryan Wingo back. They get Emmett Mosley back. And then you go in the running back room. Hollywood Smothers. He was incredible at NC State last season, originally committed to Alabama out of the transfer portal, flipped, comes to Texas. Ray League Brown was at Arizona State last season. He was really good. On the offensive line, they have some question marks, but I still look at that offensive line and still think that they're going to be good enough. They have still a good amount of pieces on that offensive line. Trevor Gooseby, he's going to be most likely a first-round draft pick. I think the offensive line will be fine to be able to win these games and still dominate at the line of scrimmage. On the defensive side of the ball, they have Grayson Littleton. I think he's one of the best nickels in the country. They bring over Rasheem Biles from Pitt. He was one of the best linebackers in the country last year. And then their X factor for me is a Colin Simmons coming off the edge. And that's a player that Tennessee is going to have a tough time defending in Neyland Stadium. I think Tennessee has the offensive line to be able to contain him, but this is a guy that had double-digit sacks last season. And I think Colin Simmons is really good. I think Texas plays for an SEC title this season, and I would not be surprised at all if Texas plays for a national title this season. I picked them in May to win the national championship. I think I've kind of come around on Oregon and Indiana and even Georgia a little bit more in the past couple of months, but I'm not going to change my pick. I'm going to keep Texas. Caleb, when you look at the Longhorns, do you think this is a team that has a chance to be a legitimate national title contender, or do you have questions about Sarkisian?
I think yes on both of those. I think Texas is a legit contender, and I also have my own personal gripes and questions with Sark. I think he has a Georgia bug, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's just, I think that stuff is real. I think not being able to beat certain coaches or certain teams is real. I mean, sometimes you just have a mental block when you play certain teams. I mean, look how many times we lost to Florida in a row. I mean, that stuff's real. So I want to see a little. I'm not going to pick Texas to win a national title personally. I can see why somebody would do that, but I personally can't put that much trust in Sark yet until I see a little bit more out of Sark. I think Sark is a little bit overhyped by the national media. I think they've been solid the last few years. I don't think they've been elite by any means, but I just got to see a little bit more out of them.
We'll move to the ACC. I think everyone would agree there's probably only one real national title contender coming out of the ACC this season, and that's going to be Miami. I think Miami's a team you could make the argument again. On paper, they might be a better team than you saw last year. They're going to lose some pieces in the wide receiver room with CJ Daniels, but they're going to bring back a lot of pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, they lose Carson Beck. I had my flaws with Carson Beck that I thought he had, but I also thought Carson Beck last season did grow as a quarterback. I thought he looked really good in the college football national semifinal against Ole Miss. Obviously had the game-winning play where he runs it into the end zone there, but I also thought he had some questionable plays. The interception last year against SMU was a bad one, and the way that he played in the Louisville game wasn't necessarily perfect either. And at the end of the day, in the national title, his interception lost them the game. So I think Darian Mensah can be a better quarterback. Darian Mensah obviously comes over from Duke. He was at Tulane in 2024. He's been a guy that people thought could be one of the top quarterbacks off the board in 2027 since he was at Tulane. I'm all in on Darian Mensah. I don't think the way they went out and got him was the most ethical way to go get him because they had a lot of people that I think they wanted before him. I think they wanted C.J. Bailey. They wanted the quarterback at Pitt before him, but they end up going out and getting Mensah. And they pay a lot of money for Mensah coming over from Duke. There's going to be a lot of wide receivers, though, that come over in his room that are going to be really good, too. Cooper Barkate was with him at Duke last year. Barkate started his career at FCS Harvard in the Ivy League, was one of the best FCS receivers, comes over to Duke last season. Him and Darian Mensah had a great connection with one another. Cam Vaughn comes over from West Virginia. He was a really good wide receiver last year for the Mountaineers. And then you bring back the X factor on this team. I think Malachi Toney could be one of the best players, not just on this team. I think Malachi Toney's a top 3 player in college football. I think Malachi Toney could put up better stats this season than Jeremiah Smith. I think Jeremiah Smith is still the better wide receiver. I think anyone that looks you in the eye and says Jeremiah Smith is not the number 1 wide receiver in the country is lying to you. But I think Malachi Toney is, about as good as you can be outside of him. He's the second best receiver in the country in my mind. He can receive. He can run. He can pass block. He can do special teams. Malachi Toney did this all as a 17, 18-year-old kid last year that enrolled a year early. This is a kid going into a true sophomore year that should be a true freshman this season. I think Malachi Toney, like I said, has the potential to be one of the best players in all of college football. They bring back Mark Fletcher in the running back room. He was incredible last season. You saw what he did in the Texas A&M game last year in the playoffs. When you couldn't pass the ball because the wind was so high in College Station, you gave the ball to Mark Fletcher, and he gave you game-winning play after game-winning play. I really like Mark Fletcher. And then on the defensive side of the ball, obviously the big question mark is going to be you lose Reuben Bain and you lose Hakeem Mesidor coming off the edges. Both of those guys are in the NFL last season. They created so much pass rush and so many QB pressures for the other team. But I look at what they bring in. They bring in Damon Wilson from Georgia. He is an incredible edge. He was at Mizzou. He was really good. He was really good at Georgia, and I would expect him to be really good at Miami. They also have Marquise Lightfoot coming off the edge. He's going to be really good this season. And then they bring back some of their really good players that they had last season in the secondary, whether that's a Frederick, a Bryce Fitzgerald, whoever that is. I think Miami is a really good team. I think when you get into the college football playoff, if you play in Indiana, if you play at Texas, I think at the offensive line, they could be out-physicaled. I'm not saying that they are not a physical team, but I think when you play those top teams, I think maybe that's the one piece in this Miami team that might not be as good as some of those other pieces on team or other offensive lines going up against defensive lines. But I look at the skill position players on Miami, and to me, they have as good of a skill unit as anybody. They have a good a quarterback as really almost anybody in the country. I think I look at Darian Mensah as a top 5-6 quarterback in the nation. I think Miami has everything they need to do to win the ACC last season. Remember, they didn't even play for an ACC title last year. Duke and Virginia did because Miami lost 2 ACC games. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think Miami rolls. I think they win the ACC, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Miami in a college football semifinal again this season. Caleb, when you look at this Miami team, is Miami a team that you have a lock for them to win the ACC? And if so, do you think they're a team that can make noise in the college football playoff again this season and potentially kind of repeat what they did last year?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say absolutely yes because, I mean, I had the exact same thing for them last year. I had the lock for them to win the ACC last year. But I think this is going to be a better Miami team, especially offensively. I think they're making a pretty big upgrade at quarterback. I was never personally a big Carson Beck guy myself. I think Malachi Toney, like you said, is probably the second best wide receiver in college football this year. And while you can say what you want about the way they went out and got Darian Mensah and how much money they paid him. He's suiting up to play football for the Hurricanes. So I know there's this thing that Josh Pate likes to say, where when it's 4th and 2 and Alabama, Georgia are playing each other, you're really thinking how much this team paid for this player. But yeah, I mean, I think once the season starts, all the NIL stuff is going to go away. So, I mean, I'm not really thinking too much about how they got him, but yeah, I think this Miami team is going to be better offensively. I still need to see what their pass rush looks like defensively, especially without Ruben Bain, but it'll be an interesting season. I think they'll be better than they were last year for sure.
We'll move over to Georgia, who I think in most people's eyes, Georgia, Texas, top 2 teams in the SEC. And obviously with Kirby Smart, Georgia is going to be a playoff team pretty much every single year. They have 4- and 5-star talent all over the field. And on the offensive side of the ball, everyone knows how Georgia runs things. They don't need Gunnar Stockton to go out there and throw for 3,500 yards. He's going to get the ball to his tight ends. Nate Frazier is going to be an effective running back. They bring over some wide receivers to help him. Isaiah Canyon from Georgia Tech. He was a really good wide receiver last year. Georgia Tech, Georgia steals him. To me, I don't love it when players go from one rival to another. I don't like that. I think that would be like, a Tennessee player going to Vanderbilt or a Tennessee player going to Alabama. I mean, you've seen it before. It's just ugly, in my opinion. If I was a player, I don't think I could convince myself to go to a rival school. But I guess with where we are in college football now, that doesn't really matter. But again, you know how it's going to be. They've always had good tight end play. Now, I do think losing Zachariah Branch is going to be not a problem for them, but he was such a player on their offensive side of the ball last season. They primarily just used him mainly for screen passes, but he would turn up field. You saw it in the Tennessee game last season, how effective he was. So I think losing Branch will be impactful. They return Landon Humphrey at wide receiver. He's a really good wide receiver. Obviously, like I said, Nate Frazier. And then Lawson Lucky, obviously, at tight end. He's going to be probably one of the best tight ends in the country. I think Gunnar Stockton is a good quarterback. I think a lot of people say, well, he doesn't have to go throw it around the yard. He's not going to throw for 3,500 yards. His arm talent might not wow you, but the touchdown at the end of the Tennessee-Georgia game that he threw in the back of the end zone on 4th down, he dropped that in the bucket. That was as good as any throw in college football last season that you saw. I think Gunnar Stockton, just because of the offense that he plays in where he doesn't have to play hero ball, people kind of sleep on Gunnar Stockton. He's still a top 3 quarterback in the SEC, in my opinion, with Arch, Trinidad, and himself. And then the defensive side of the ball, you bring in Jabari Riddle, you have KJ Bolden, you have Ellis Robinson. All of these guys on the defensive side of the ball are always going to be good. Elijah Griffin up front. Georgia's going to be loaded on the defensive side of the ball, as they always are. And the offensive side of the ball over the past few years, they've gotten better too. So I look at Georgia as a team. They might not have the most explosive skill position players. They might not have gone out and gotten the high money safeties and corners all over the field. But you know what you're getting with Georgia. You know that they're going to win. Kirby Smart wins. Kirby Smart and Kirk Cignetti are the 2 best coaches in college football right now. And I would be honestly a little bit surprised if we get an SEC championship where it's not Georgia and Texas. And I would be shocked if Georgia and Texas aren't in the college football playoff. Caleb, when you look at Georgia, do you think Georgia is another team that, as long as they take care of business, they should be in the college football playoff? You especially look at that schedule. I understand that when you're one of the best teams, the games are easier because you're just better than pretty much everybody. But in regards to an SEC schedule, they play a pretty easy schedule. They don't really have a true road game outside of Athens until October. Now, they play Arkansas early in the season, but I would expect that game to be a bloodbath. Arkansas is the worst team in the SEC. To me, they drew a pretty good schedule and obviously a highly talented team. Would you expect Georgia to also be in the playoff this year?
Yeah, I will. Kirby has earned the right for me to just be blindly trusted and blindly respected in this regard. I think they're always going to win at the line of scrimmage. They're always going to have a really good tight end. They're always going to run the ball really well, and they're always going to put whoever their quarterback is, whether it's Gunnar Stockton or some other non-superstar quarterback, they're always going to put them in a good position to win. I think the way Georgia runs things is very, very blue collar, very just run the ball down your throat and run 5-yard outs to your tight end and beat you that way. But yeah, I will always blindly trust Georgia. And on the terms of the schedule, it's kind of like you said, it's when you have a team of the caliber of Georgia and you look at their schedule, if you have that as Georgia's schedule versus South Carolina's schedule, you're probably having a different conversation, just because when you just comparing the teams apples to apples, Georgia's just going to be just better than everybody else they play. But yeah, I think they have an easier schedule in terms of SEC SEC play, but it's tough when the team's as good as Georgia.
Well, we'll go to the final contender that I have is LSU is kind of the only really main team. I had a couple other teams that I was going to get to of non-contenders, but we've kind of run out of time, so I'm going to get to the last contender that I think is a lock. So I have Indiana, I think, is a lock to make I'm not going to say any of these teams are locks because it's college football, and as fluid as college football is, like we said earlier, you don't know what could happen, and it's college football. Anybody could beat anybody, but if I were to take 4 teams that I definitely think are going to be in the playoff no matter what, it's going to be Indiana, it's going to be Texas, it's going to be Georgia. I think it's going to be Miami because I don't see anyone else beating them in the ACC. And then for me, it's going to be Oregon, and they're the team that I'm going to get to here right now. I think Oregon has a complete roster as anybody in the country. They returned Dante Moore. He could have gone to the NFL draft and been the second quarterback off the board. There was even smoke. Maybe he would have been the first quarterback taken off the board. Obviously, that was before Fernando Mendoza led Indiana to a national championship, and rightfully so. He's the Raiders' number 1 draft pick, but Dante Moore would have been right there. He would have been the second quarterback taken off the board. Decides he's going to make some more NIL money, come back and play college football. And you look at his wide receiver room, it's as loaded as anybody in the country. You have the 2 young cats and DeCorian Moore and Jeremiah McClellan. Then you have Iverson Hooks that you bring in from UAB, who was one of the better G5 receivers last season. And then you also have Evan Stewart, who's been an effective college receiver too, was injured last season, but he's nursed his injury back to full health this year. I look at that wide receiver room and that quarterback, and that's going to be really good. You look at the offensive line, they return some production there. They only bring in 1 transfer on the offensive line. And then you look at the tight end position. Jamari Johnson is going to be their next tight end. Some people have said this kid might even be better than Kenyon Sadiq was last year. And Kenyon Sadiq was the best tight end in the country last year. So if you have the best tight end in the country, you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and you have one of the best wide receiver units in the country, and you have a really good offensive line, it's pretty obvious that you're going to have a really good offense. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. They bring over Coy Parrish from Minnesota. This is a kid that's a strong safety, but does everything. He played offensive snaps for Minnesota last season. He played special teams. He can do anything. He's an athlete. He'll be all over the field. They have a Bear Alexander back up front. This team is loaded from front to back end, even on defense. I look at this team, and then I look at Brandon Finney, a kid that was a freshman last year. He was a lockdown corner. If you want to go back and see how good that kid was, go back and watch his film in the Texas Tech game when they played each other in the Orange Bowl, and they shut Texas Tech down. This kid is a lockdown corner. He is really good. And I just look at this Oregon team. To me, they're the 5th team. If I had to pick 5 teams to make the college football playoff, it would be Indiana, it would be Oregon, it would be Georgia, it would be Texas, and then it would be Miami coming out of the ACC. I don't necessarily know that Miami's as good as the other 4 teams that I said, but again, if you win the ACC, you're going to be in the college football playoff. So I look at those 5 teams as the teams that I'm definitely selecting to make the college football playoff. Caleb, anything that you would add on Oregon? Obviously going to be a very talented roster this season. Are you as high on Oregon as I am?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Oregon's another one of those teams who's just they've earned the right to be there every year. I think Dante Moore is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think Oregon's one of those teams that, you know, they it's weird because they kind of get talked about and then they kind of don't. It's weird. For me, Oregon is kind of properly rated where they need to be in my mind. I think Oregon's going to be really good. Obviously, they play in a tough conference. They play some tougher games this year, but yeah, I'm pretty high on Oregon.
To me, the thing about Oregon too is if they are going to be able to win the national championship, can Dan Lanning win the big game? Dan Lanning's won the games he's supposed to. He's beat some really talented teams, but can he beat an Ohio State? Can he beat the Indiana? Because last season when he played Indiana, Indiana obviously won the national championship, but they came into Autzen and beat Oregon by 10, 30-20 in kind of the middle part of the season. And then they got embarrassed in the Peach Bowl. I was at that game, and that was one of the most lopsided games between 2 teams that are really good teams that you will ever see. So can Dan Lanning win that big game? We'll have to see, because Dan Lanning, I think he's a really good coach, but I do need to see him be able to beat those top 3, top 5 opponents before I can say definitively that Oregon is, a national championship caliber team or a team that I think is going to win the national championship. I definitely think they make the college football playoff, but can they go deep in the college football playoff, which is something they won their first game last year against JMU, and JMU was a really good team, and they scored a lot of points on them. But again, they got humiliated by Indiana in that in the Peach Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So what can Oregon do once they make the playoffs this year if they do make it. That'll wrap it up for our college football top teams that we expect to make the college football playoff. You can tell us in the comments what teams you're buying and what teams you're selling going into the 2026 season, whether it's in the SEC, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, whoever it may be. You could have added Texas Tech there too, but I think Houston is an interesting team in the Big 12. Maybe that's something that we'll get into in the show later in the week or next week. But on the other side, we're going to continue the conversation as we have the rest of the show. We'll be back on the other side. It's overtime here on Fan Run Radio. Stick with us.
Explain that. It's Fan Run Radio, Knoxville.
Hi, this is Bo Kregner from the Kregner Group at Realty Executives, and I know there's a lot of choices here in East Tennessee when it comes to choosing a realtor. Here's why the Kregner Group is different. At the Kregner Group, our motto is walking by faith, serving others. It's how I live my life. It's how I run my business. Here at the Kregner Group, we're committed to doing real estate the right way. Faith, honesty, integrity. The Kregner Group. Call me anytime at 865-742-1035 or visit my website at boknowshouses.com.
Have you ever found yourself wishing your clothes looked brand new again? Whether it's your favorite suit, that little black dress, or your comfy winter coat, Crown Cleaners can make it happen. From stubborn stains to delicate fabrics, the expert team at Crown Cleaners uses the latest cleaning technology to ensure your clothes come back looking and feeling fresh. Visit one of their 2 area locations, Kingston Pike on Bearden Hill or South North Shore Drive near Dunkin' Donuts. Online at crowncleaners.com. Crown Cleaners, a tradition of excellence.
Attention service members and veterans. Introducing the Griffin Law Firm, your trusted ally in military legal matters. From court-martials to benefit claims, at Griffin Law, your mission is their mission. Here's VFL Marshall Griffin.
As a veteran and retired military attorney, I've successfully defended lifelong benefits and helped preserve professional futures. So I know that when you hire a military justice lawyer, you maximize your chance to get relief. With my unique experience, I can advocate for you because there's no military matter that's too big or too small. Let us help you make these critical decisions that could affect the rest of your life. Remain silent. Request counsel. Call Griffin Law.
For a free consultation, call 888-707-4282. That's 888-707-4282. Or just visit griffinlawdefense.com.
What kind of day is it? It's a White Claw day. Grab a pack, grab your friends. Everything else in life can wait. Your friends shouldn't. Let's go. White Claw. Grab life by the claw. Please drink responsibly. Hard seltzer with flavors. White Claw Seltzer Works, Chicago, Illinois.
All right, back here on Overtime here on Fan Run Radio. Again, we appreciate you hanging out with us here on this Wednesday evening, however you may be doing so. We appreciate you. And again, on the Fan Run social media, make sure to throw us a like, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and use that chat box down below to interact with us here at Overtime and all of the shows here that we have at our daily lineup every single day. We're going to shift back to Tennessee after a great conversation on college football from a national perspective there as we kind of looked at it from a bird's eye view. We'll circle back now into Knoxville specifically, where I kind of hinted earlier in the show. There's a player for Tennessee that if he has a really good year, it's unlikely, but if he has, well, it's not unlikely that he has a really good year, but it's unlikely, I think, that he achieves the number of yardages that he needs. But if Deshaun Bishop this season rushes for 1,547 rushing yards, he will break Travis Henry's all-time rushing record here at the University of Tennessee. Henry was obviously a standout running back at Tennessee in the late 90s and played, I believe he was from 97 to 2000, was a part of the 98 national championship team, was a 1,000-yard rusher later in his career. Deshaun Bishop was a 1,000-yard rusher last season. And we talk about how awesome Deshaun Bishop is. This is a guy that, was at Carnes High School and, had offers to Coastal Carolina and walked on at the University of Tennessee and actually got in some trouble early in his career, put that behind him and became Christian and has really kind of changed his life. And he talked about that at media days. He was open about his faith and obviously has put on a lot of muscle this offseason with this Derek Owens training program. And you look at the training regimen that they've done and what they're eating. Deshaun Bishop is another one of those guys that you look at and kind of looks like a different player almost than he did this past season. And So Deshaun Bishop is obviously going to be fed the rock a lot this year. Last season, he was obviously your main RB1, but you did have a Star Thomas in your backfield, and you also had Peyton Lewis, who's now at Virginia. And so you had kind of a three-headed room. Obviously, DeJuan Morris was a part of that room as well, didn't get as much run as the other guys did. This year, it's going to be Bishop, and you're going to have Javon Gordon as your RB2 that comes in from Tulane. I think Gordon's a really good player. I think he can be used a lot on maybe short down packages, get you 3-4 yards for a first down. He's kind of one of those runners that is hard to bring down, got strong legs, stuff like that. So I like Javon Gordon. He might not go, yards per carry, the amount that Bishop has, because Bishop had basically 6 yards per carry last season and had multiple games where he had 100-plus rushing yards. But if we look at this, so he needs 1,547 rushing yards, which would mean if you played 13 games. So hypothetically, if Tennessee plays all 12 regular season games and then they play a bowl game or, they make the college football playoff. If they win a college football playoff game, obviously he could play 14 games or whatever. But if you lose in the first round of the playoffs or you play in a bowl game, which is most likely if you go 8-4 or 9-3, you play 13 games. He's going to need 119 yards per game to do that. And you look at some of the players in the SEC last season that had around those numbers. Kejuan Lacey at Ole Miss had 1,567 rushing yards, which would have been 20 more than what Deshaun Bishop needs this season. And then Ahmad Hardy, who I believe is the best running back in the country, if he's healthy, that's going to be a big question mark for him this season, but he had 1,649 rushing yards last season. The difference between Lacey, Hardy, and Bishop is Lacey had 306 carries last season, and you could see once he got to the Sugar Bowl, he had some injuries that he was dealing with. And then when they played Miami in the bowl game, he was really, you could tell, beat up. 306 carries in 1 year is going to take a toll on your body. Ahmad Hardy had 256 carries last season. Deshaun Bishop, he had 1,076 yards, but he only had 182 carries. So he actually had more yards per carry than Kejuan Lacey did. But Kejuan Lacey had 125-ish carries more than Deshaun Bishop did. And I think Deshaun Bishop will have 6 yards per carry again this season. I just don't think Deshaun Bishop is going to get anywhere near 300 carries because I think Javon Gordon is someone that you're going to use still in this offense. And frankly, this is a team that's going to pass the ball more than Mizzou is. Mizzou relied heavily on their running back room last year because they had Hardy and they had Jamal Roberts. And they went through their entire quarterback room and were on QB3 with Matt Zollers at the end of the season. So passing the ball effectively wasn't necessarily an option that they had sometimes. There were games where Matt Zollers only had 120, 130 passing yards, but they could win the games because they effectively rushed the ball. Tennessee, I don't think, is going to have that issue. As long as your quarterback play is decent, you have a wide receiver room that has a plethora of options. So as much as I really want to see Deshaun Bishop get the 1,547 rushing yards and break the Tennessee all-time rushing record, a record that obviously is one of the more impressive records in Tennessee football history, and it would be so cool to see a Knoxville kid be able to, accomplish the feat as a walk-on. I'm not saying that he's not good enough to do it because he is. Yards per carry wise, which is the most important statistic as a running back, in my opinion, he's good enough. I just don't think he's going to get enough carries. I mean, unless he goes up to 7-8 yards per carry, which is going to be very difficult to do in the SEC, or unless they give him 250 carries, which I just don't see happening, I don't think he's going to be able to obtain the feat. Caleb, when you look at this, do you think Deshaun Bishop has an opportunity to break this rushing record, or are you with me that it's going to be nearly impossible to do just because he's not going to have enough carries?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think it would take an absolute just all-time season here from Deshaun Bishop for him to come close to that, because I think there might be a world where we utilize the run a lot more than normal just because we do have a younger quarterback. So I don't know. There might be a world where he has to rush for 200, 250 yards a game. So I don't know. It's really a 50-50 for me. I could see it going either way and not really being surprised.
And I mean, you look at Deshaun Bishop from last season. I mean, he had multiple games where he did kind of put the team on his back. Obviously, the Florida game, he was very productive in. The Mississippi State game, he didn't really break one loose until you got into overtime. But in overtime, he wins you the game. First play of overtime, dashes 45 yards into the end zone. The Alabama game, he was really good. I know your team fell short of expectations in Tuscaloosa there, but I thought that was one of the better games of his collegiate career. He played good in the Syracuse game. I mean, Deshaun Bishop is going to be one of the best running backs in the SEC. Obviously, you have some other running backs that return that are really good. Kewan Lacey, Ahmad Hardy, who I think is the best running back in the country. With the injury that he's dealing with over the offseason, we'll see how impactful he is the first couple weeks of the season. And Mizzou still has Jamal Roberts in that room. So if they have to ease Ahmad Hardy back into it, I think they will. And then obviously Jaden Ball at Florida, and then Rayleigh Brown and Hollywood Smothers at Texas. So it just depends on who gets the most carries. I think Kewan, again, is probably going to get a lot of carries. Even with Trinidad throwing for 3,000 yards last year, and Trinidad has the ability to use his legs. You saw how much they relied on Kewan Lacey because Kewan Lacey was kind of their only guy in the running back room that they really trusted. Tennessee has a couple guys in the running back room that they trust. Obviously, Deshaun Bishop, again, still is obviously going to be RB1, but I think Javon Gordon's going to get a pretty good amount of snaps this season. I think Javon Gordon's going to be a guy that is going to get in some important first downs for this team. And I think Javon Gordon will score a good amount of touchdowns for this team. He was, one of the starting running backs for Tulane last season, a team that made the college football playoff. So I think Deshaun Bishop is a top 3, top 4 at worst running back in the SEC. I think you can make the argument that he's better than Kewan Lacey. He had more yards per carry than Kewan Lacey did last season. It's just Kewan Lacey had more carries. And obviously, if you're a bell horse, workhorse running back like that gets 250, 300 carries, you're going to put up stats. Even if you only rush for 3.5 yards per carry, if you get 300 carries throughout the year, you're going to be a 1,000-yard rusher. So as much as I love Kewan Lacey and think he is an incredible running back, his volume was a little bit higher than a Deshaun Bishop last year. His volume was a little bit higher than an Ahmad Hardy. So that's why I look at like Isaac Brown at Louisville. I think his yards over the season weren't as high as Kewan Lacey and Ahmad Hardy, but Isaac Brown had the most yards per carry in the country. He averaged like 8 yards per carry last season. So I think yards per carry when looking at a running back, in my opinion, is most important. And running backs that kind of put their body on the line to get that first down. If I'm giving my running back the ball on 3rd and 2, can he get that the first down? Can he get a first down when they load the box? Stuff like that. So I look at Deshaun Bishop, and I think it's just going to be hard to obtain the record just because I don't know that he's going to get enough carries. But again, if you're having trouble with the quarterback play early in the season with a freshman quarterback, I think you do rely heavy on Deshaun Bishop. And heck, maybe he goes off one game and has, a career game where he has 200 and 250 rushing yards in one game, and he's on pace for it because he has a couple of games like that. It wouldn't surprise me as impactful as he is. And I don't really think Deshaun Bishop has a ceiling based on what I've seen in camp so far, what you saw in spring camp, what I've seen this offseason, what I saw in Tampa at SEC Media Days. He's one of the leaders of this team. He's one of the smartest individuals on this team. He's got the body and the LBs that he's put on and the muscle mass that he's put on this offseason. I think of any players on this team, I think Deshaun Bishop is the most obvious superstar coming into this season. I think I would put the most stock in Deshaun Bishop, and I think Deshaun Bishop is the most obvious player going into this team. Caleb, when you look at Deshaun Bishop, would you say that Deshaun Bishop is the most surefire thing that Tennessee has going into this year? Obviously, lots of good players, but I would say Deshaun Bishop is probably the guy that you can rely on most of any player on this 100-man roster.
Yeah, I'd say definitely on offense, you would say that pretty easily. He's the most production you have returning, and yeah, I don't think that's a very hot take to have.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up on the other side with the final thoughts. Stick with us here on Overtime.
Congratulations. You found sports radio that doesn't suck. This is Fan Run Radio, Knoxville.
Barley's has live music on weekends, general team trivia on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., and now live sports trivia courtesy of the Knoxville Trivia Guys every Thursday night upstairs. The game starts at 7 p.m. and is free to play for everyone, so head on down to the Old City and show off your sports knowledge and win gift cards to Barley's. Use those gift cards to buy some delicious food and drinks, and you can take it all in with their wide selection of TVs and indoor projectors. Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria.
Golf Envy Farragut is the premier indoor golf experience you've been looking for. And right now they are offering a limited number of founding memberships. Golfers can reserve their spot for just $150 before their September grand opening. Founding members receive 90 days of unlimited guest passes, as well as an exclusive risk-free first month. That's right. Try out Golf Envy with no obligation. Give it 30 days, and if it's not the right fit for what you're looking for, your first month's dues will be refunded. Members will get access to their Golf Zone 2 Vision NX simulator technology, the most realistic simulator on the market, where they can play more than 300 courses and compete in leagues and tournaments with players all across the country. Golf, rain or shine, 24/7, 365. To learn more and become a founding member, visit their website at farragut.golfenvy.com/presale.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jacob Wilco at Knoxville Smiles. Have you ever wanted to improve the look of your smile? We know firsthand what the power of a great smile means to a person's confidence and health. Our team of doctors can provide you with an array of options for helping you achieve your cosmetic goals. From simply moving teeth into a better position, to reversible cosmetic bonding, to full mouth implant-supported dentures. It is our goal to help patients feel good about their appearance while achieving optimal health. Want to learn more? Call us at 865-539-1776 to schedule an evaluation, or visit us online at knoxvillesmiles.com.
Here on Overtime, wrapping things up here on this Wednesday evening. We appreciate you sticking with us for the entire 2 hours. We appreciate all the support that we've had on Overtime this week in kind of our kickoff week back with Overtime. It's great to have Overtime back here on Fan Run Radio, Mondays through Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. And again, Caleb and I will be here for the rest of the fall talking Tennessee football, Tennessee basketball when we get going, recruiting, and then obviously college football as a whole, all over the country. Anyone that knows me and has listened to me on the Playbook with William Pattison over the past year knows that I love college football. It's my favorite sport in the world, and I'd like to say that I'm pretty knowledgeable on it. So it's something that I like to talk about. I think college football and college athletics in general unites people. You know, you might not agree with someone politically or whatever it is, but if you sit next to them in Neyland Stadium for 3.5 hours and you share the same Tennessee fandom with somebody else, it doesn't matter what walk of life that you come from or what you agree with that they don't. You know, you're a fan of the state's team, and you can kind of come together for 3.5 hours and put life behind you and root for the product that's on the field. So that's one of the reasons why I really like college sports and college athletics in general. I think it takes people's minds off the crazy world that we have, and it gives you something to look forward to every Saturday. And college football is a beautiful thing. But final thoughts here as we're wrapping up. Yesterday on Final Thoughts, we talked about the University of Akron doing this thing where if you buy season tickets for $75, yes, $75 for season tickets, you have the opportunity to be the offensive coordinator for the opening drive of the Akron Robert Morris game, a promotion that I don't think any team has ever ran in history. And yesterday I said, this is kind of stupid. What is Akron doing? Why would you do this? This could end as a disaster. What if the guy, Steve from Cleveland, that's an Akron alumni, wants to come in and run the, double reverse flea flicker, and Robert Morris takes it back for a touchdown, and Robert Morris beats you? Multiple people are getting fired. But after thinking about this is something that I think maybe more G5 teams should do. Now, I don't know that they should do that a fan becomes the offensive coordinator for a drive, but there's some type of incentive to get people in the seats, because their tweet got 18 million impressions yesterday. And if you don't know much about Twitter, 18 million impressions on one article or one share, one post, that's a lot. And it got 2.6 thousand reposts, 14,000 likes. This was the number one thing on college athletic Twitter yesterday. If you follow college sports, this was everywhere. This was all over your algorithm. And like I said yesterday, I thought it was a little bit stupid, but more I think about it, 18 million impressions for the University of Akron, a team that plays in the MAC, plays Tuesday night football during the weeknights. Weekend games probably not getting many people in the crowd. People that live in neighboring cities in Cleveland or whatever city it may be nearby probably have season tickets to Ohio State or watch Ohio State games or maybe Cincinnati games or Michigan games. Whatever fan you are, even if you went to the University of Akron, you're probably a Michigan State, Ohio State fan, someone in that region, in that area, opposed to an Akron fan. So I think this is actually a really good marketing play to get people in the crowd. Caleb, I know you like college football from all perspectives like I do. Do you think some of these smaller universities should maybe try and do a marketing campaign like this? Maybe not be offensive coordinator for the first drive of the game, but do something to get people in the seats, because I think a lot of these smaller schools, they need to get the community involved, and they need to get the community to back their university, because like I said, I think a lot of these smaller schools, the fans just go, be a fan of the big state school. I bet, at MTSU, when they're playing, Conference USA games against New Mexico State on a Tuesday night, there's not too many people in Murfreesboro watching the games because they don't care. They care about the University of Tennessee, even if they went to MTSU. I think wherever you're an alumni of, you should support the team. So I think this is actually kind of cool what they did, and I think it's something that more schools should adopt.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely on that train of thought where pretty much the only fans of these schools would be people that went to these schools, and even then they probably have an Akron t-shirt or something, but they probably find themselves going to the Ohio State games every weekend. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that, I mean, these schools have always done this with marketing ploys. I don't think we've ever seen something to this degree of calling plays for a drive. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good idea for them to have aggressive marketing campaigns for how small their teams are.
I just think any team can use their marketing campaign better. I think Tennessee, their athletic department uses their marketing campaign really good. Like when you saw DGG come for a visit and you got him in the blackout jersey, our marketing team does a really good job, I think. And I think some teams for recruiting specifically, marketing is a big deal. How you sell your university and how you sell your stuff. And obviously, it's going to be easier for the University of Tennessee to sell themselves other than, the University of Akron or Kent State or somebody like that. But I do think that even those type of schools, they're putting millions of dollars into their football program still. Kent State might go play Ohio State and get beat by 70, or Akron might go play Michigan State and get beat by 50. But those are bye games. And Akron, Kent State, whoever it is, Eastern Michigan, whoever you are, you're probably going to lose that game, but it gives you valuable experience for your roster so that when you get into MAC play, you played against that offensive and defensive front for those teams, and it gives you the opportunity to play in a stadium that holds 70, 80,000 people, 100,000 people if you're in an Ohio State-Michigan game, opposed to playing at Akron where your stadium only holds 25, 30,000 people, and there's probably only 5,000, 6,000 people there any given night. And so I think when you get the money from those big schools, use it effectively. Use that money for your marketing campaign to get people to come to your games. And like I've said before, I love college football for not just the power conference games. I mean, I love watching SEC football and Big Ten football as much as anybody. But, I mean, if it's a Tuesday, Wednesday night, I'll throw on some action. I'll throw on some Conference USA ball. I'll watch some Fun Belt, Sun Belt on a Wednesday night. I love all college football. I think that's what makes college football special is you get so many different universities and institutions that have so many different things and so many different, fan bases and different bars at schools and different fraternity and Greek life at every school is different. I think that's what's cool about college football around the country is that not every school is the same and every school is unique. So I thought that was a very cool marketing strategy by Akron. But I will say, if a pick six does occur during the fan-driven offensive coordinator section, I still stand by the fact someone will get fired and it would be a disaster. But overall, thumbs up to Akron. Good job to them. That'll about wrap it up for us here on Overtime on a Wednesday. Another great show. And again, we appreciate you listening to us here on this inaugural week back on Overtime for the first time that we've been back on the air for a while. For myself, Garrett Armbrust, Caleb DeBusk, we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow, Thursday, will be our last show of the week, Monday through Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. It's Overtime. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening.